Hey, welcome back to the Bible Reading Project. I'm here with my best friend, Pastor Chuck.
Pastor Chuck, man, in the room. In the room. Can I say something real quickly?
I will allow it.
Okay. Thank you for my coffee.
You're welcome.
You brought, I didn't even ask.
Yeah.
And you went above and beyond to get me Starbucks coffee.
I felt it in the spirit because he did tell me you didn't sleep very well last night.
I did not. I got up at 2:20 in the morning and couldn't sleep.
We filmed this later in the day. So I thought, well,
Have you ever just like in the middle of the night woke up and you just can't go back to sleep?
Sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, I just couldn't. From 2 o'clock to 6:30, I just laid there like, yeah, this is not good.
I'm a heavy sleeper.
You don't have to make fun of your weight, man. I thought that you just put yourself down. I don't think you're heavy. I think you're awesome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But if that's the way you feel, praise God. Right. But thank you so much. What kind did you get me? Because we're sponsored by Black Rifle Coffee, Beyond Black or just black. But you brought me something different in a Starbucks. What was your choice?
Yeah, it was from Beep Bucks.
Okay.
Because we don't want Black
Rifle Coffee getting upset.
Yeah. So it was a large Americano.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yes.
And thank you for opening up today, man.
Yeah,
Book of Revelation. Here's what we're talking about all week long. Revelation chapter 1.
Right.
We landed on this thought yesterday. Are we blessed if we just what?
Read it.
Just read it. I don't have to understand it necessarily. I don't have to figure out who the Antichrist is or the harlot riding on the beast and the red dragon.
Right.
Just read it.
Yes.
Question. Have you ever just read the whole book of Revelation?
No.
Never.
No.
So this is a first for you.
Yep.
All right, so we're going to hang in there. You're going to hang with me.
I'm going to hang with
Not
you.
going to ditch out on me. No. So we got 22 weeks of reading it, and we've committed to read chapter 1 every day.
Every day this week.
So we're going to be reading it every day, pulling it out. So let's just jump in first 3 verses because this is what I want to talk about today, and I think it's a biggie. Is the book of Revelation, you tell me what you think, is it a literal book, meaning it speaks to reality, or is it just figurative and allegory?
Probably before I started watching Believers University, I would have said it was a mixture of both of those.
Okay, pretty good mixture of both, which is cool, right? Because in the book of Revelation, because it's a prophetic book, everybody's got their opinions. So there's some people that believe the book has already happened.
Yeah.
This is it. We're living in the millennial kingdom. I had a friend that believes we're in the millennial kingdom right now.
I sure hope we aren't.
I do too.
Because if this is what it was.
Because if in the millennial kingdom Corona showed up, something's up. And so I'd like to call him because I haven't talked with him since the 90s. Okay. So I would like to call him and ask him, are we still in the millennial kingdom since Corona came in? Like that's a different thing.
Yeah, if you were building your theology around the 90s, then it probably was pretty good because you had
Mayan
boom
calendar,
boxes,
Mayan calendar still there, still
parachute pants, Nickelodeon.
Yeah, so I just like to call him though. I may reach out to him and see if he still thinks we're in the millennial kingdom. But there are people that think that. There's other people that think book is historical only. It speaks to nothing of the future.
Right.
And then there's others that believe it's kind of part symbolic, kind of part allegory. Yada, yada. My opinion, I just think the whole book's literal. So I'm not saying I'm right. I just take this all literal.
Right.
So when John is writing about a locust coming up or a demon coming up out of a pit or, and it's got fire coming out of its mouth and a sting on it, I think we try to interpret our 2020 revelation. Oh, he must have seen a tank or a nuclear missile or nuclear war. And what I read as I study the book of Revelation, I just don't see it. I think he literally wrote what he saw. Because I think God's big enough. If he saw a tank, God would have said, hey, translate that tank. And then John could have said, I ain't got a clue what you're talking about. He goes, don't worry, I'm God. Right? But he just wrote down what he saw. So I guess if he saw some kind of beast flying with horns and stingers coming out of its tail, then that's probably what he saw. That's just the way I take it.
Sure.
Makes it funner to read that way.
Yeah, right.
And so I want to read a few verses and tell you why I land on, I believe it's a literal book that is a reality to come and not just historical as in it's finished and done and over, which some believe it is. So verses 1 through 3. This is the revelation from Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show his servants the events that must soon take place. So here's why I think it's not just figurative and allegory, because the revelation that came was about events, not just allegory.
Right.
But if it's an event, it must be reality. It's not just some superficial figurative thing, but a literal event. He said, you're going to write down these events that must soon take place. So when I read that years ago and I saw that this book is about events that are going to come, that it must be more of a literal read than a figurative read. Let's keep going. He said he sent his angel to present the revelation to his servant John, who faithfully reported, and then this, everything he saw. So I believe that it's not just a download of words to John.
Right.
In some weird way, I think God showed up and showed God a panoramic cinema of what's going to happen at the end of the world. So could you imagine sitting on an Isle of Patmos and you're like in a cave or wherever he was. There's an actual place called the Cave of the Revelation where they think he actually was. I don't know, but it's there on the Isle of Patmos. It sits off Asia Minor.
Sure.
So can you imagine being there and all of a sudden an angel shows up and said, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to show you a panorama of all the future that is to come.
Yeah.
You don't have an iPad, an iPhone, a computer. I guess you just have a quill with pen and you're just writing with ink the best you could on papyrus probably, right? And so can you imagine sitting there and having the book of Revelation downloaded to you in picture form and you have to write down as you're seeing it?
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't sound that romantic, right?
Right.
It would be hard enough to sit here and type it all out, much less have to dip the ink, go, oh, could you say that one more time? But I don't believe that it was just an angel talking. I don't know how this happened, but I think if he said, I want you to write down the things which you saw and faithfully reported, I think he was watching like a movie screen of God's wisdom.
Like an IMAX theater type of thing.
Yeah, in a weird way. Like before there was ever TV.
Right.
He's showing him television. You know what I mean? Like in that kind of way, like a video.
Right.
So I don't know if he like went into an eternal realm and was seeing past time.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like God took him out of time and then began to show him all of time.
Sure.
So that makes me think that it's not just about allegory.
Right.
That he had to write down what he's seeing about events that are to come. So whatever he's seeing and however allegorical and figurative it looks as he's scribing it down, he's just, it has to obviously be connected somehow to a reality.
Right.
Because there's events. Then he goes to say this, I want you to write it down, report the word of God, the testimony of Jesus Christ. Verse 3, this is what we landed on. God blesses the one who reads the words of this prophecy to the church. And here's a weird thing. Is the church still here today?
Yes.
Okay, so it would make me think if this book was just historical only, then it either has to still speak to me today, and the events, if they've transpired, then it's just a historical book like all others, or it really does continue to speak to the church today and continue to have a voice to me today, which I believe it does. And then he goes and says he blesses all who listens to the message. And then this is what I really landed on that made me think I need to look at this book differently, because he said, and I want you to make sure they obey what it says.
Right.
Like, how can you obey if it's just an allegory?
Right.
Is God going to hold me accountable for obeying a book that is just figurative and allegory?
And I think that's where the task becomes too daunting, that I'm like, I don't even have time. I'm so busy. I could read 5 minutes of Philippians chapter 4, but to take an hour and a half to study out and figure out how I can figuratively obey God from Revelation chapter 1. That's why I think people don't read it. But I think if we can take it in the literal reality context, then I think it'll be easy to comprehend.
I want to read something to you. He says this in verse 19 of chapter 22. Listen to this,
okay?
Because this too made me think maybe this book is not just figurative allegories, a historical book that's past, but it must be a reality.
Right.
And here it was. Listen, verse 19 of Revelation 22. And if anyone removes any of the words of the book of this prophecy, God will remove that person's share from the tree of life and the holy city that is described in this book.
Wow.
Yeah. So if that's just allegory,
Right.
why would it matter if I remove something out of it or not? And we would say, well, because God wrote it and it's an allegory that God wrote. But then I love what he said. He said, I'm going to remove your share of the tree of life. So the moment he tells me there's a tree of life and this book talks about that tree of life, it makes me think, well, then that's not just an allegory.
Right.
Like the very connection to me believing it is connected to a reality, not an allegory.
Right.
Is the tree of life figuratively or is it real? And I believe the tree of life is real.
Yeah.
I mean, I think most Christians would believe that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I land on believing it's a literal book because he tells me it's about events. It's a literal book because he tells me I have to obey it. And it's just hard to obey allegory. So I think there's a connected obedience to the literalness of it.
Yes.
And then I think, hey man, just don't take away from it.
Right.
Because I'm gonna hold you accountable to it.
Right.
Well, how can you hold me accountable to something that's just figurative? It's just, whatever.
You're right.
Well, that's just kind of where I landed. So,
Yeah.
Give me your final thought on that.
No, I agree. To hold some, if like we learned 2 weeks ago, if God is my judge and my justice, it's impossible for a judge to hold anybody accountable to something figurative that's just a figment of an imagination, right?
Right.
An enigma. You can't hold anybody accountable to that because that's not justice. That's an opinion,
Right.
Made up, a made up story. But if it is reality and God is a justice and a judge, then he can only hold you to something that is reality.
Man, that's good. I like it. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow. Revelation chapter 1. Read it all week long and believe this. If you don't believe anything else, I'll put it back up there. If you just read it, you're blessed. So just read it out loud every day and let the blessing of the Lord touch your life. We'll see you tomorrow.